My boyfriend takes advantage of being a golden retriever, and I am fed up. I, 28 female, have been with my boyfriend, 29 male, for 6 years, and we've been living together for the past 2. He's a giant, dorky, handsome gamer with a naive, childlike heart. Recently he went on a work trip with a new colleague, 29 female, and came back on cloud 9. Shortly after, I noticed he was hiding his phone. I asked if he noticed he was doing so. He said, "Oh, no." A few days later I explicitly asked if he was texting his colleague. He said yes, and I lied before when you asked, because I didn't want you to get the wrong idea. We had been going through some other relationship issues related to his avoidant attachment, so I believed him, but asked if he could slow down building this new relationship as we worked to fix ours. He agreed. He's a golden retriever. He just wanted everyone to be happy. 2 days later I felt what can only be explained as women's intuition, or maybe it was a bad falafel. I asked to see his phone, which I've never done. Sure enough, hundreds of photos were shared with a colleague over the last few weeks and messages shared with her while I was left unread. I asked to see Instagram, and he added and DM'd her, mere hours after I had asked him to slow things down. I thought the messages were flirtatious, talking about showers, how it's dangerous to go against HR and add her on Instagram, but he assured me that he was not capable of that. Again, he's just a cuddly dog. A week later, he told me that he told his colleague that I was uncomfortable with their relationship. I wish he hadn't aired our problems out to her or blamed me. Then he asked me if he could start texting her out of work hours again. He feels bad that he made things awkward. All throughout this he still neglected our underlying relationship problems and instead prioritized her and her needs. When I call him out, it's my fault for assuming such a lovable guy could be capable of such calculated betrayal. He's close friends with 2 of his exes, so I don't have a problem with him having female friends, but this is different. Am I overreacting, or just stupid?
My wife was in a coma, so I read her diary for comfort. I deeply regret it, and now I can't look at her the same. My wife was in a bad accident a few months ago that resulted in her being in an 8-day coma. Obviously when she went into the coma, no one knew at the time how long it was going to last. I was envisioning months, if not years, before she would ever wake up. If she ever did. It truly felt like I had lost her already. I was destroyed with grief and the weight of all the uncertainty. Every day that passed with no good news further plunged me into despair. We have been married for 10 years. We have traveled the world together. We are truly each other's best friend. I was seriously considering ending my life if they told me she was brain dead or just wouldn't come back from it. One night, I was in our bedroom and really going through it. It was probably the 5th or 6th day. I was emotionally and physically exhausted and drained from it all. Another day of no good news. I was laying on her side of the bed because it still smelled like her and it was comforting to me. She used to put on lotion at night before we got into bed, so I opened her nightstand drawer to get the bottle and saw her diary there. I have never gone through her things or her diary before, but that night I just wanted some piece of her. I don't know why I didn't just reread our old texts or something. I wasn't really thinking too logically. It's not an excuse, but it is what it is. I began to read her diary. She didn't write every day, so sometimes entries could be days or months apart. This diary was started about 3 years ago. Very quickly I realized that almost all of the entries were angry ones. Angry about female friends or social media followers. Long paragraphs about how they were home wreckers and ugly, or talentless, or some other negative trait. She would become furious if a woman followed me on social media or if we ran into a friend in real life. She wrote pages about these women and how she wanted them to die or have their lives destroyed. She was angry that I basked in all the attention and didn't remove female followers online. She was angry if a woman followed me and didn't also immediately follow her account because we are a package deal, not that these whores know any decency to respect that. She wrote long rants about how women know the nuances of social media interactions, and this somehow proved for certain that they wanted me, and were actively trying to disrespect our relationship by only following me and not her. I need to stress that none of the women she was angry about have ever messaged me inappropriately or acted in any way besides a friendly manner towards me. These were high school or hometown friends mostly. A big common element many of them had was knowing or being friends with exes of mine. She raged on about how I should not be allowing them to glimpse into our lives, and she suspected they were reporting back to my exes. To be honest with you, the entries were very unhinged and angry. Then I read some entries about how she had messaged some of them from secret accounts. I am summarizing here, but basically over the course of 12 years she has messaged and harassed several women, and subtly accused them of trying to sleep with me or disrespect our relationship. She pretended to be an anonymous person from our hometown, and would tell them things like, "I heard XYZ talking about you and they told my wife's name, and my name, that you were obsessed with me," and just weird manipulative crap that would result in the person deleting me, without ever telling me why. Like we're talking years of this. Any new person who added me and not her was immediately a problem, and she made sure they knew it somehow in a way that would never blow back on her, but still got them away from me. So much made sense. Friends who had ghosted me over the years. People who blocked me. People who didn't say hi in public anymore. It's not like hundreds of people, but definitely 10 to 15 who I just never understood what happened. I would mention these things to her, and she would seem comforting and try to reassure me and then ask innocently if maybe they had a thing for me. Always non-threateningly. Always saying something like, "Yeah, I've had some guy friends who did that." It turned out they were jealous of our relationship. I had to cut them off. It's just not appropriate to have them around knowing their intentions were not purely platonic. I never suspected anything. I just accepted everything she told me as plausible and even thought to myself how graceful she was in light of it. I'm not even covering half the stuff in the diary. Just blatant manipulations of other people in their lives, people she got fired by digging up dirt, literally nothing crazy, maybe a Facebook comment someone made about doing substances, and sending it to their jobs. There were some normal entries. Basically things like trips we took and how much she loves me. Absolute night and day. She woke up from the coma days later, but had some mobility issues that are now mostly hammered out. I couldn't do anything. For months I've had to be the supportive, loving husband she knew before the accident. I've supported her through her entire recovery. I have had to act like I don't know any of this. All the while living with dread whenever someone adds me. I immediately remove them as a follower. I don't know where to go from here. If I'll ever actually confront her. I would like to think I'd have the stones to do it, but honestly, I doubt it. Thanks for listening.
I discovered my boyfriend has been living a double life our entire 6-month relationship. I, 23 female, had known John, 28 male, for years as his mom was my manager at a care home. We were always very friendly and even at one point his mom, my manager, tried setting us up. He then got into a relationship with someone else and they were together for 2-ish years. We didn't speak much while they were together but we weren't super close anyway, so honestly I barely noticed that we hadn't spoken for a long time. Anyways, they broke up at the beginning of this year. At this time, I was a dog walker and he had a dog. I got a random message from him one day after years of next to no contact, asking of good places to walk his dog around a specific area in our town. I of course replied and I went with him around the area with his dog, and we went for a walk 2 weeks after he sent the initial text. He told me he had broken up with his psycho ex and told me about all the unhinged things she had done to him throughout the relationship. Things like cheating, abuse, locking him out of their house, making him sleep in the spare room because he snored, blah blah blah. Of course after hearing about what he went through, I told him that if he needed me I would be there, and also apologized for not being there at the time and not reaching out throughout his relationship. We began talking, then dating, and we got into a relationship. Everything was so lovely for a few months. He met my family. I already knew his but didn't meet them when we were together. This should have been a red flag but apparently I'm colorblind. He used to have a lot of work parties and I attended one of them. They were field parties, very juvenile, drinking and doing substances in a field with music and a fire type of gathering. He had always asked that we don't post on any social medias about us, or post selfies etc., as he knows his psycho ex followed my Instagram and would have some abuse to hurl at me or him if she saw it. I was gullible and believed this to be true, because why wouldn't I? He was kind, loving and never gave me any reason to doubt him. I completely forgot about his no social media rule at the bonfire and posted a blurry picture of the bonfire and 2 of his friends in front of it. He didn't say anything at the time but all of this backstory will make sense in a minute. We then planned a getaway to Wales. He told me he had a discount for a specific website and then we discussed where we wanted to stay etc. He then booked it when I wasn't there, told me where it was, time and date etc. I booked it off of work and we were both very excited. The day before we were supposed to leave he tells me the house had been double booked and we could no longer go. I asked to see the email and he said he couldn't find it. This is where I start becoming suspicious. We decide to go to Cornwall instead and stay in their family caravan, not as nice as the place we had booked but it is what it is. We travel down on a 4-hour car ride, get set up in the caravan and go for food. A few times he would leave the caravan to take a call from his dad, sister or friend. I didn't think much of it because a lot of the time he would say it was a work friend, he was a manager, so I just thought business as usual, they just need some advice etc. He would sit in his car on these phone calls which at the time didn't raise much suspicion. He would also many times go and lay in a spare room and watch films on his phone instead of sitting with me and watching them. This all felt a bit weird but I didn't want to bring anything up and ruin the trip. We went for a drink on our final day there. He's on his phone a lot and in playing with the dog and finishing off my drinks. He put his phone down on the table as he is pressing the off button. In the split second it was on, I see his ex's name pinned to the top of his messaging list, with a message that had just been sent. Not only this, there were hearts next to her name, again, very juvenile. I don't say anything at the time because I'm not trying to be stranded in Cornwall with no way back if it got heated, and he drove off. So I keep what I have just seen to myself and act normal. Naturally I'm texting my friends like, you'll never guess what, and asking for advice. Most of them said to confront him but I didn't feel comfortable doing so when I was so far from home. We get home the following day, we say goodbye etc., and he goes back to his house. At this point I'm curious as to what the hell just happened on our getaway, especially because of all the nasty stuff he had said about her, telling me she is blocked and will never speak to her again etc. I messaged one of his exes who I was friends with in secondary school and asked what happened between them, because I felt he was likely lying and cheating with his recent ex. She tells me he cheated on her. So now I'm mad because I should have clocked it sooner or even branched out and asked this girl what had happened just as a little check. But, it turns out, the girl from secondary school knows his recent ex, let's call her Molly. Molly ends up messaging me saying that my high school friend had told her about me and John and that she wanted to know details like how long, how intimate etc. I took my time replying because I was anxious, especially after everything I had been told about her. I go back to the message and start typing out a response. Before I can press send, she sends me a picture of 2 positive pregnancy tests. I stop typing and message John instead. I ask him if he has been speaking to Molly recently. He tells me no. I tell him I saw her name on his phone. He says it's because he wanted to see the dogs they previously shared and she had only just started letting him see them again. I ask him why he lied in the first place by telling me he hadn't spoken to her at all, and only now that he knows he got caught is he willing to tell me he's been going over to see their dogs. He doesn't reply. So I go back to Molly's message and we get to talking. Yes, they were broken up. But they hadn't stopped seeing each other. Not at any point in our 6-month relationship was there a week where he hadn't gone to hers at least 3 times. 3 times a week whilst in a relationship with me. At this point I'm pissed off, especially after learning she's pregnant and that he knew all about it. I message him something along the lines of, "Aw, I'm sure you'll be a good father." He finally replies to my bait and asks how I know, if I have been talking to Molly, telling me not to believe a word she has been saying and that I should know him better and to believe him over her. At this point she has phoned me and is telling me she's 6 weeks along. He's been sleeping with her, staying at her house most nights, and or coming over on his work breaks if he was busy that night. Busy? Bull crap. Anyways, he's trying to tell me she's lying and he likes me but thought we were just friends so no harm etc. Friends? He asked me to be his girlfriend? Is he delusional? Meanwhile, Molly is telling me that she saw messages on his phone from me once, the one with the dog walking routes, and they got in an argument about me then, and since that she had always had her suspicions about me and him. She would constantly ask him about me, asking to meet me if we were just friends. Valid point from her. She also goes on to tell me that he uninvited her from the work field party, the one I attended. I tell her I was there and she said she knew already because she saw the picture on my Instagram, and her and John got into an argument about me that night too. I also found out that he was constantly reassuring her by telling her that he would never do anything with me because I was fat, I wasn't attractive, I was ugly etc. All whilst he was hanging out the back of me. I tell her all the things he called her too. She said she had messaged me weeks before asking about me and John, but had deleted it because she didn't think it would be true and that she might have been making a mistake. Boy, I wish she hadn't deleted it. She also told me, and showed me video proof of him hurting her, laying his hands on their dogs, and other things he did to them that was just awful. She had hidden cameras so that she could get it all on evidence if she ever needed it. It also turns out his family and friend calls on the trip were her. I had never met his family because he had never told them about us. He had never booked the initial trip to Wales. The Cornwall holiday was supposed to be for him and Molly. When he cancelled the holiday with her, he said he was taking his cousin as he was going through a hard time. Just lies after lies. I messaged John a few final messages and let him know she has told me everything. Everything. And he ignores me for a while before coming back with a message so long I didn't even read it. I say goodbye and tell him to have a nice life. I haven't spoken to him since, and she hasn't either. She has moved house as he began stalking her, sending her letters begging for forgiveness and apologizing profusely. My sister, boyfriend and parents have completely stopped engaging with me after I terminated my baby. I, 27 female, have a younger sister Jenny, 25 female. Jenny has been with and married to her husband Jake, 27 male, for almost 3 years, and together for 5. They really do seem like a match made in heaven. However, one thing she's struggled with for a long time is infertility. Jenny has wanted kids for as long as I can remember. But when they started trying 3 years ago, it just never happened. They tried everything but their doctor just said Jenny wasn't capable of carrying a baby to term. They've since looked into adoption or even surrogacy, even though it is way above their budget. I on the other hand, have never wanted kids. Not when I was a little girl, not now and hopefully I'll never have any in the future. I don't know why, but children make me anxious and childbirth is just a nightmare to even think about. Recently I found out I was pregnant. It was a complete shock and sent me into a panic attack. My boyfriend, 29 male, was upset when I immediately suggested ending the pregnancy. I told him I didn't want kids ever but he was adamant on not ending the pregnancy. He suggested taking full custody and raising the baby all by himself if that's what I wanted. He reluctantly even suggested adopting the baby out of my hands completely. Anything but he was not willing to be without the baby. My parents reacted worse. They said they wouldn't allow me to hurt a living being and offered other options. They even told my sister who just jumped at the chance to adopt my baby, saying it was perfect and the baby could remain in the family and be raised by loving parents. Now, I don't doubt they'd make great parents. But, I just don't want to go through a pregnancy. Every moment felt like an explosion would go off any moment. I hated it and I refused to continue with the pregnancy. I went behind their backs and got the procedure done. When they found out, my boyfriend just coldly told me we are done and walked out. He isn't taking my calls now. Jenny wailed and insulted me before Jake took her home. She then blocked me and has since refused to even look at me. My parents keep saying they are disappointed and wished I wasn't their daughter so they wouldn't have to deal with me. I just want to fix things with them. They're my family and have always been kind and caring. I desperately want to sort their problems and for things to go back to how it was before I got pregnant. Any advice on how I can explain my feelings to my family? Edit to add, guys please. My parents and sister and boyfriend are not bad people. I know I wasn't in the wrong for choosing what to do with my body, and neither do I think they were wrong for being pro-life. My parents have cared for, raised and supported me all my life. Through my teenage years, my studies, my relationship issues, career problems, everything. I know they aren't bad people. I just want to know how I can explain my feelings to them because I'm confused and struggling with expressing myself. My boyfriend and I have been together for 9 years, damn it. We literally grew up together and promised to always be there for each other and always choose each other. He supported me through everything. He offered every help he could think of during the 2.5 months I was pregnant. He tried to understand my fears and help me through it. I understand I was wrong to go behind his back, but that's done, and now I want to know how we can move past this. He didn't leave when people made fun of him for dating me, when college life got too hectic and we had to go days without seeing each other, when my grandma died, when I was sick, or when I was terrified of a baby. He was there for it all, and I don't want to be without him. Please help me convince him to seek counseling or therapy or whatever it takes. I can't bear to lose him. Update: my parents called me yesterday. My boyfriend, yes, he still is my boyfriend, we have not broken up, talked to them and actually helped them see my perspective. They had called him to apologize for my actions, but he was adamant that they needed to apologize to me. He explained Jenny wouldn't have gotten our baby anyway since he was planning to be a single parent and raise the baby himself. So, it was their fault for giving her false hope, not mine. And he even drove them to our house so we all could talk. My mom is still a bit upset, but they apologized and promised to talk to Jenny. I'm hopeful things will work out between us. We're sisters after all. After they left, my boyfriend and I talked. He apologized for forcing me to do something I didn't want. He said he thought if he took good enough care of me, the fear would slowly dissipate and we could be happy. He now sees that was wrong. We hugged and cried for a long time. He kept saying sorry and I told him it was nothing. That as long as I had him, I would be fine. He then said he wanted to give us closure, but he still wanted to break up. At that, my heart sank. I fell to the floor crying and he held me through it all, cuddling me and kissing my head. He clearly still loved me and I loved him. I asked why we have to end this. He told me he wanted kids. Our kids, but if it couldn't be, he'd rather move on and not linger, as staying child-free was impossible for him. I promised him I loved him beyond anything and I'd do anything for us to remain together. But he just wouldn't listen. He kept saying us wasn't enough. That he wanted kids. He apologized again and tried to leave. At that point, I was desperate and I grabbed him and promised him I would get therapy. We could try therapy and maybe in a few more years, I'll be ready for kids. I promised to try for him but begged that he stay. He looked so sad. It broke my heart. I kept begging for a second chance and refused to let him go unless he said yes. Finally he said he'd think about it. So, that's where we're at. He asked for a week and promised he'll think about it. I scheduled an appointment for therapy tomorrow. I think I can get better. After all, the fear is irrational, and this incident has shown me the desire to be with Will, my boyfriend, is way stronger than my fear of pregnancy. Will has done so much for me. Has always been there for me. I have decided to give this a try. I can't be without Will and I'm willing to overcome anything to be with him. That's it for now. I think Will saw my post since he's on Reddit too, and that spurred him into actions. Reddit also got me working too. So thank you for that. Please pray for me in my relationship. I wrote a note to my valedictorian that made her leave the school, with no consequences. Years ago, when I was in high school, there was a girl at the top of our class, we'll call her May. May was known for being very quiet and timid, anxious and antisocial. She had long bushy hair that reached pretty much her backside, and she always brought a messy stack of books and papers to each class, despite not needing them for anything. Everyone felt bad for her. She was seemingly incredibly intelligent but crippled by anxiety. But one day, in a class we shared, I realized she was writing answers for a test on the desk and covering them with her hair. If you write on a desk in pencil, it can be easily wiped away with your hand, and that's exactly what she did after the exam. She was a cheater. I talked to another kid in our class, James, and he said, "Oh yeah, May always cheats, everyone, of the students, pretty much knows that." She would apparently even write answers on the strewn papers in her desk pile. Nobody wanted to get someone like May in trouble, but frankly as someone just outside the top 5 in my class, it made me livid that May could just cheat blatantly with everyone letting it slide, all the way into the valedictorian position. That makes a major difference for scholarships and everything, and we came from a pretty poor area. She was also an officer in the National Honor Society, and while I know that means nothing now, at the time I thought, wow, she has no honor, this is ridiculous. One day, in the math class, me and my friend Kevin shared with May, we had a substitute teacher who didn't really care what we spent the class period doing. So I wrote, in a careful, bubbly print that was nothing like my typical handwriting, a note to May, basically saying, "Hey, everyone knows you cheat, and if you don't knock it off, we'll be forced to tell the National Honor Society what you did." So cringe looking back at it. I don't think I really would have done anything with the note. Of course, the fact that I wrote it in different handwriting says differently. But Kevin was joking that he would give the note to May, and I was joking back. But to my shock, he did give it to May, by sneakily putting it on the side of her messy desk. She noticed it eventually and must have read it. We had lunch next and May was sobbing, literally losing it at her lunch table. The friends she sat with all encouraged her to go to the office about whatever happened, and she eventually did. I started to freak out, because I never thought she'd react like that, and I was someone who never got in trouble. My mother would unalive me if I did. So I was terrified of getting called up. I just wanted May to stop cheating. Towards the end of my next class, it happened. My science teacher said I was called to the office and I felt my soul leave my body. I went up and walked into the principal's office. Imagine my shock when he wanted to talk about something completely different. He heard from my ex's new girlfriend that I was going to beat her up, which was wildly untrue. We both laughed about it and he said he didn't think that was true but had to check. Then he just asked casually, before you go, do you have any idea what happened in your math class earlier? I simply said no idea and tried to be convincing. He said okay and I walked back to class. Later that day, I realized some of May's lunch table group seemed angry with me. May had gone home early but her friends seemed ready to fight me, based on the looks I was being given. I was so anxious that they knew I had written the note. At the very end of the day, I walked into the office and asked the vice principal, my volleyball coach. I was terrible and we didn't win a single game in 4 years, just so people don't think my athletic prowess saved me here, if I could speak with the principal. He said the principal had already left for the day. I straight up said I wrote the note to May. It was me. I lied to the principal earlier. My coach, vice principal, just said okay, I'll tell him tomorrow, and that was the last I ever heard of the situation. I never got in trouble. May never returned to regular classes. She was removed from the school rankings, although I recall her attending graduation and getting a diploma. Her mother was a teacher in our school system, so maybe that had something to do with it, who knows. I graduated within the top 5 and it absolutely helped me get better scholarships. But I do often feel guilty and wonder what happened to May.